Hi, this is Shay from Full on a Journey, and I want to talk to you about how to get to know a new tarot deck in one weekend. I have quite a few decks now, and in sort of getting to know them as I've been getting them, I've kind of done the same thing to familiarize myself with all of them. So I started kind of looking around for other new things I could do, and all of the answers I found were incredibly long and very drawn out. It was talking about, journaling, about every single card, pulling a card a day for 78 days, meditating on every card for 5 minutes, which are all good things. I do those things with some of my decks, but to me that's study. That's not really getting to know your deck. So I guess the first place to start in this video is to say what I mean when I say getting to know a deck. It's just being familiar with all of the cards, having at least seen them, so that you don't turn over a card and think, oh God, what is that? Being familiar with the tone that your deck reads with, which we'll get more into later, and kind of having an idea of what the creator was trying to do when they made the deck, what their view was of the deck. Just so that you kind of know when you pull it out for a reading, even if you don't have all of the meanings of every single card memorized, you sort of know generally how it will respond. That doesn't mean that you know what cards are going to come out. It just means that you know if it's the kind of deck that's going to be really blunt and just like aggressive and, just tell you straight up, this is the problem, fix it. Okay. Is it going to be one of those decks that's just really sweet? Does it want to just give you a hug and say, okay, now this is really what we need to be doing, and that'll make things better? But finding out those kinds of things about a deck, to me, is being familiar. And you can do that in one weekend. You don't need 78 days. You don't need however many hours it takes to spend 5 minutes on every single card. So, step one of getting to know a deck. Decide if you are going to trim. This is a Lo Scarabeo deck. This is the Royal Dark Tarot. Also, viewer discretion, there is some artistic nudity. I trimmed everything off mine. Lo Scarabeo has the 6 different languages around all of their decks, which just annoyed me, so I went ahead and trimmed it all off, and I did edge it in black. The reason I say to do that before you start going through all this did you know or get to know you stuff is because, in my opinion, when I walk out of a salon after I got a crazy new haircut, I feel like a totally different person. So I just feel like get to know the deck as it's going to be when you are using it. Also, borderless really does change how the cards interact with each other. When you take a border away, this now looks like these two are going at each other. When there's a border there, there's something that is sort of keeping them a little farther apart. So it just really does change your perception on how they interact with each other if you take that border away and, have the cards really be able to be flush together. So decide if you're going to trim or not is step 1. Step 2 is go ahead and shuffle and lay out your cards into a deck interview spread. This one is one that I created. Yes, most of the questions are ones that you would typically see. I just created this format because I really liked how it sort of it all worked together. So walkthrough of this particular interview, and I will put the positions down below. 1 is the center. What would you like to teach me? 2, what are your strengths? 3, how do you see me? 4, what are your weaknesses? 5, how do you see yourself? 6, how best can I learn from you? 7, what are your favorite types of spreads? 8, what will be the outcome of our working together? And 9, what advice do you have for me? Once you've laid them out, if you have some sort of tarot background and you already know some vague meanings of the cards, go ahead and start kind of putting something together of what you kind of think it means. Again, this is just something quick that you're doing, over the weekend. Don't worry about doing any kind of crazy long journal extensive thing. My suggestion would be to take a picture. Personally, I don't think you should interview a deck more than, super often, because you don't really, I don't think it really changes. Unless you haven't used a deck for years, the interview should still say pretty much the same thing. I have pictures of all of my deck interviews of all of my decks on my Instagram, so if I ever want to go back and look at them again, I have them. So don't worry about writing it up, just take a picture, see generally what you see. If you have a deck that you're already familiar with, set that out with using the same cards that you drew from the new deck, so you can kind of compare and contrast how these cards do, what these cards were doing and what you're used to. So you've got it laid out. If you have no idea what the cards mean, the next thing you need to do is pull out your little white book or companion book if it comes with one. The only thing that I really think that you need to read before you get going is if there's anything specific to the deck, which in the Royo Dark Tarot, it's just those, 3 paragraphs at the top there? That's it. The rest is just vague, how you read the cards, what the suits mean, and then it goes straight into card meanings. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the spreads yet. Don't worry about, card meanings. Just know what is specific to your deck. For example, the important part of this one, it says, Royo represents a violent and cruel universe where torment and bliss, poetry and desperation are difficult to conceive one without the other. Looks at the darkest places of humanity. In each card, the reader will be called to see the beauty and the beast within, to embrace them both and let them be one. So that really gives you the tone of what this deck is about. Those are some very hard, dark words. So now you sort of know where you're going. And then if the very first card that you drew here is the Three of Swords, just find the Three of Swords, which in this little white book says addiction to pain, self-loathing, leading to self-deception, letting yourself be the victim. So what do you want to teach me? The Three of Swords, don't be the victim. Don't, don't kid yourself about who you are and what you are. Look at yourself. I want to teach you to look at yourself, is what that would respond to me, which is awesome. Great way to start an interview. And then you kind of go from there. Also, in the little white book or companion book, it's sort of a good idea to look and see what words, individual words show up a lot. In the Royo Dark Tarot, we get the word future shows up a lot. I see the word darkness a lot. I see the word forces a lot. Just recognize the words that show up pretty regularly. I'm seeing lust and sexuality a lot. Just because the words that the creator used to describe the deck clearly states the tone with which he went at making the deck. So sort of just gives you a good place to go. Once you've gone through and looked at all the meanings, a good thing to recognize if you're using this particular spread is the mirrored cards here. So strengths of the deck, weaknesses of the deck. The strength is the Ace of Wands, the weakness is the Page of Pentacles. Those are very different cards, which makes sense. The other mirrored cards you want to look at are how do you see yourself and how do you see me? This is pretty cool. This is the Ace, is how this deck sees itself, and the Two of Cups, they're both cups, is how you see me. So clearly it thinks we are going to work well together. Same suit, Ace and the Two. which is very cool. So definitely notice the mirror cards there. And then the cards in the line straight down the center is how best can I learn from you, what do you want to teach me, and outcome of us working together. So those three are a big one. And then really pay attention to the advice that your deck is giving you. That essentially, when you pull out tarot cards, you're looking for advice, either for yourself or some other people. So that's the first time. That's kind of the first time that you've asked this deck for advice. What does it tell you? Is it telling you something harsh? Is it telling you something sweet? That kind of is another really good indicator overall of what, you know, the attitude is of the deck and the tone of the readings that it will give you. So that was step number 2. Step number 3 is to take a look at the majors, or the major arcana. That is all of the cards numbered 1 through 21, and then 0. Also, some decks it's 1 to 22, but usually it's 1 to 21 and 0. So 0 is not really a number, which is why my Fool's kind of just hanging out over there. I've lined them up in 3 rows of 7. And what you're looking for here is not meaning. It's not, don't look for any kind of super in-depth message. Don't worry about taking notes. Just, you're looking at the majors. What do you notice? First thing I notice in this deck is Temperance, which is the water one right there. It's super bright. I mean, it's like glowing. Judgment, same thing. Judgment, Temperance, and it looks like maybe the Hierophant are the only ones of all of the 22 that look like they're happening during the day. So that really says something about this deck. It's all happening at night. Anything else that sort of just sticks out at you, just notice. In this particular deck, you notice that all of them have some kind of weapon. All of them, anything else they all have? They all have some kind of weapon. There's typically some kind of monster or something in the card. There's something not human, or there's something not human-esque about the people that are in the cards. Quite a few of them have wings. We've got wings on Judgment. We've got wings on the Girl in the Sun. Wings on the Devil. The wings in the Hermit. Those kind of look like wings around the water right there. Wings on the Dragon and the Hierophant. That is not wings on the High Priestess. I think that's just her cape. But just notice. Just notice some things about them. I noticed that the Fool and the Magician are actually dressed a lot alike, except that she is a woman, obviously, and that's a man. But they both are in black and red, and they both have masks. Interesting. But just take a look and see what pops out at you. Water is also showing up here. We've got water in the Hermit, water in Temperance, water in Judgment, and water in the Devil. Whatever that means doesn't necessarily matter. It's just something to acknowledge. If you pull out cards that have water, you know then, well, there's only a couple of those. You pull out a card that's happening during the day and a reading in this deck, and you're surprised because there's so few of those. So just sort of take it in. Another thing to notice is if anything is happening down in rows in any of the decks, the only thing that comes to mind for me as far as the rows in this one is in the Empress, the Wheel, and the Star. They all have sort of a circle going on here. So there's sort of a circle in her throne, there's the circle in the Wheel, and there's a circle in the Star, which is interesting. The Moon and the Sun really stand out as well, actually. Is really, I mean, it almost looks like the same picture, except this one is the Sun and this one is the Moon. Anything else in the threes? Nothing's really jumping out at me. But just see what you see. Lay the cards out and let whatever comes to your mind come to your mind. It's just about being familiar. So once you get familiar with them like this, we're going to take a look at them one other way. Okay, so just a different view of the majors. If you're totally new to tarot, you may have never heard of the Fool's Journey. As simply as possible, it's just the path that you could walk between the Fool, meeting every single card along the way, all the way around to the world. So we have a circle of the journey here going on. And the point is then to look at the cards that are completely opposite to each other on the journey. So to start off, then you're looking at where you start and where you finish, which is super cool in this deck specifically. You are looking at the Fool in the World right here. The Fool, this is the beginning of the journey. She's wearing a mask, she's wearing a costume. At the end of the journey, also the hair is, dark. Now suddenly it's blonde. She's totally, stripped bare. So definitely a really, just a really good way to envision this journey as you're starting, covered up and being something that you're not. And now suddenly at the end here, we've totally accepted who we are. So just something that's really cool to think about. This one actually is really cool to think about too, because there is just nothing in common here. The only thing I can even think about these two particular cards is one's clearly nighttime, one's clearly daytime. Sometimes there is no consideration. There's nothing between the two of them at all. That's okay. That's part of learning the deck, learning when there's no connection there at all. So that's what we got out of those. The Sun and the Empress, which is actually pretty cool. I'm sorry, the Sun and the High Priestess, which is actually pretty cool here. She looks like the Queen of the Bats, and the Sun has like bat wings, so maybe she like works for her or something. That's what comes to my mind there. Between the two of these, what comes to my mind is that these are just like some super confident women. They look like they know exactly who they are. They're exactly where they want to be. She is bathing in that moonlight and she's loving it. She's lounged out on her throne like, she knows this is mine. I'm supposed to be here. So these are just super confident women in these cards. And just keep going from there. Notice the things that are the same. Notice the things that are different. And just sort of get familiar with that sort of attitude of your deck. Sometimes what's in common here isn't much. The only thing that I'm getting from the Wheel and Justice here is the circle in the wheel here and the circle in her weapon in Justice. And then once you've sort of picked up all the cards and really kind of looked at them, individually, now you know everything in general about the majors. Another thing to sort of keep in mind too is that it's something that once you've kind of got it in your mind, it's something you'll remember. For example, when I read with this deck, these two cards, they don't necessarily look anything alike. Typically the Emperor and the Star don't have a lot to do with each other, but this sword looks just like this sword to me. And when I draw the Star, it makes me think of the Emperor as well. He's got that, really strong and controlled pose going on. She is in the dark, it's in the middle of the night, she's picking up that sword anyways. She does not have the same pose that he does, but she's picking up that sword and she's going for it. So that kind of colors a little bit of the Star now for me when I read this deck. Do I still call to mind generally what the Star means, traditionally? Sure, but now it is sort of the traditional meaning of the Star then becomes seen through the glasses of the Royo Dark Tarot. It sort of colors now the Star for this deck, which to me is the purpose of getting to know the deck. You sort of take those traditional meanings and see what they look like through this particular deck. So that is what you're going for in this. Step number 4, we are looking now at the court cards. So these are going to be the people of your deck. Typically they are Page, Knight, Queen, King. In this deck, originally, I think they were Knave, Knight, Queen, King. Sometimes it's like Slave, Warrior, Mistress, Master is one of the decks that I have. There's the Prince, Princess, Queen, King, you know, just whatever the people are. There should be 4 for every suit. And I have them organized here by suit. All the pages are in a line out here. Then we've got the knights right here, queens and kings. Cups are across the top, then the pentacles, then the swords, then the wands. I did intentionally put swords and wands together, as those typically have to do with the elements that are typically like the male elements of, you know, swords being air, wands being fire, pentacles are earth, cups are water. Those are the female elements. So I did do that intentionally. If you don't know whether or not, you know, what elements are associated with the cards in your deck, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. Again, you're just seeing what jumps out at you. So if we're looking at the pages first, they all look like they are getting ready for battle. That is the first thing I noticed about the pages. The Page of Cups is like meditating over her sword. She's pulling on her helmet. She is heading out into the woods, and she's got tons of weapons. This one actually sticks out a little bit because she actually does not look that way. All the other ones sort of look like they're getting ready to go. She's sort of like sinking into this. So that sort of means something, that is so different from the other ones. So now when I see that Page of Wands, I'm going to think this page doesn't have quite the same meaning, you know, as the standard of the other pages. It means something a little bit different. She's going a different direction. Ooh, and literally a different direction. They're all kind of walking this way and looking this way, and she's the only one that's totally going that way. Her head's tilted that way just a little bit, but her body is going this way. So just another cool thing to notice. All of the knights are riding a horse, well, except for the Knight of Cups, which is riding some sort of rat-looking thing. I don't know what that is. But yes, they are all physically riding. They all have weapons, except in this one, the weapon is in the girl's hands that's down in the snow instead of the person who's on the horse. So something to think about with the Knight of Wands. The queens. Okay, in the male suits, both of the queens have weapons, and in the female suits, they both have some kind of like bondage going on. She's wearing a collar and those really thick cuffs. She's got a chain around her neck. So interesting that it's like that. Kings, there is a masculine, if not literally male figure in all of these. You have a couple in both of the female suits, so there's a couple there in the King of Cups and a couple in the King of Pentacles. The kings in the male suits, you just got just the one dude here. This guy's on the throne, but he's got these 2 women like serving him. So just things to think about. So really, except for the queen, the Suit of Wands in this deck just kind of does its own thing. It's very different, which then is something when it comes to the court that I will acknowledge when I'm reading with this deck. So that's sort of something that you just sort of get to know as you go on. And looking across the suits, the only one that really comes out is the swords. All of the swords are actually holding a sword. Anything else? Nothing else is really standing out to me that is across all of the suits. But that's sort of getting to know your court, you know, just look at all of the pages, look at all of the court for the suit, look at all the knights, then look at, you know, all of the suit, all the queens, then look at the suits, then the kings and look at the suits, and then you've seen the court cards. Moving on. Step number 5, we are looking at all of the pips, which are going to be ace through the 10s of all of the suits. I have them lined up sort of the same. Again, I've got wands across the bottom, aces over here, 10 is over here, and then swords, pentacles, and cups. And just let yourself look and see what stands out. Some of the first things that I notice, the purple that you see in the sky there on the Eight of Pentacles, that is nowhere else in the deck. There's no other, I haven't seen that color at all, so that really stands out. The bright sunshiny sky there in the Ten of Cups and the Three of Pentacles, those are the only places that you see that. Anything else that stands out? There's a ton of moon in this deck, so you can actually see moon in the, what's that, Nine of Wands. You don't see moon in the Eight of Wands, but come on, werewolf transformation, clearly that's moon energy right there. There's moon in the Six of Wands, Two of Wands, Ace of Swords, Seven of Swords. Let's see. Three of Cups. And the, let's see, what is that? That's the Seven of Cups. Oh, sorry, that is the Eight of Cups, my bad. So just see, I see a lot of moon. What else do I see? The Seven of Pentacles. She is not a human, which, I mean, some of them are not human, but you can, like, she looks like water. You can totally see through her. She's either a ghost or she is water, which is really different. What else stands out? The rain happening in the Two of Cups up there is the only place that I see rain. Everybody pretty much looks armed in this deck, which again makes me really notice the people that aren't. So the ones without weapons we're looking at here, the Ace and Two of Cups, the Three of Cups. I mean, everybody sort of has a weapon going on here. Seven of Pentacles, Six of Pentacles, Five of Pentacles, Three of Pentacles, Two of Pentacles, Ace of Pentacles. Okay, so a lot of the pentacles are not armed, which is interesting for that whole suit for this deck. And just sort of keep going in that vein. What do you notice? What jumps out? There is a lot of gray in the swords. The swords look very gray, except for the Nine of Swords, which there is still some gray going on there, but the general color scheme of all of the swords is really gray, which is interesting. Anything else about the pips? You know, and then notice if there's anything that they all have in common, you know, down the rows again. So like all of the aces, it's just one woman. Ooh, except there's a dragon behind the Ace of Cups. I don't know if you can see that from there. So that's interesting. I don't see anything going on in the twos that really stands out. But just as you look down the rows, if anything catches your attention. So what I actually am noticing is that it's like most of the suits have something in common except for one. So, for example, in the fours, the Four of Cups, Four of Pentacles, and the Four of Swords are all in this real relaxed, meditative, you know, she's sort of in this comfortable squat. She's sitting, she's laying down. She looks like she's up and dancing, and that is the Four of Wands. So that's something that's different. And you kind of see that again. All of the 8s all are looking away, except for the 8 of Swords. She's looking right at us. So that's something to notice. We got wings in all of the 9s, except for the 9 of Cups. And then you've got the 10s of the male suits have weapons and look like warriors. The 10s of the female suits are standing next to men. Interesting. That is pretty fascinating about this particular deck. So these are just sort of things that you notice, and then once you've noticed them, they're just kind of in your mind. And now that you've seen all of the cards, you're not going to flip over anything that you've never seen before, and you'll know things. You'll know, if it's this specific deck, everything's pretty much armed. You flip over something that does not have a weapon, that's important. If you flip over, again, anything that's daytime, that's clearly important. Anything else? The non-human, well, I shouldn't say non-human, but there's the, she's a ghost. These kind of look like specters. Lots of these ladies got wings, so that's something to note if they do or if they don't. This one is a man, just a man. There's not a woman in this card at all, which I think that's one of the only ones that does that, except for the Emperor. So the Emperor and the 5 of Wands are the only cards that do not have women in them at all. Which is definitely something then to notice if you flip, those cards in this particular deck. So just, now you spent your time, you looked at all the cards, you've laid them all out, you've seen them, and now you know the feel, the general tone, and you're ready to start reading with your deck. Okay, so I just thought I was done. This is sort of a PS to the getting to know your deck. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to someone who is totally new to tarot, unless you already have sort of a solid base in astrology. I actually got this information for this sort of layout of the cards from Corin Kenner's Tarot and Astrology. So what you have in the center circle here are the major arcana that rule the 12 signs of the zodiac, and then the minor cards that make up the decans of all of the signs. So like the Emperor right there is Aries, and his decans are the 2, 3, and 4 of Wands. Taurus is the Hierophant, that is the 5, 6, and 7 of Pentacles, and so on and so forth. You can find the information for which of the minors make up the decans for the signs, and I am using like I said, I got it from the Tarot and Astrology book, but those are the Golden Dawn associations with the majors, between the majors and the signs, and this is kind of just a really cool look, just to kind of see, was it something that they noticed? In this particular deck, nothing really stands out to me. Obviously this isn't something they were necessarily looking at when they were making this particular deck. The one thing that I do sort of get is the lights in Sagittarius, which is Temperance, with the 8, 9, and 10 of Wands. She is this total glowing body of water. Then you got all of the light glowing there around the 8 of Wands, and then if you can see as it goes up, the 9, she's got all this light down here, and then the 10, she has light glowing down on her head there. So just kind of cool things to notice as you sort of get to know your deck. If you already have sort of a base in astrology, that's a cool way to do it. One of the decks that I have, it was super clear that everything matched up perfectly with the pips and the majors, except for Capricorn and Aquarius, and it was super clear to me that they needed to be flopped. So for whatever reason, the devil in that particular deck is Sagittarius, and Temperance is Capricorn, because everything else just fits so perfect except for those two. I just couldn't leave it. So now I sort of have in my notes about that deck that if I'm looking into any kind of astrology or astrological associations with that deck, I know I'm flipping those. So just if anything stands out like that, it's just another cool view. If you have some astrology knowledge, or if you want to learn some astrology, that's a cool way to add to the list of getting to know your deck in one weekend. Thanks for watching.